Here, we don't really care about stock prices. We care about the business engines that power them. And today, we are popping the hood on one of Sri Lanka's biggest conglomerates, Melstacorp. Let's see what's really going on under there. All right, just the quick, standard disclaimer before we dive in. This is for educational purposes only. It is not, I repeat, not financial advice. Okay, look at this number, 1.28. This right here, this is the single most important thing you need to see. It is the key to this whole story, the anomaly at the heart of this entire business. What you're looking at is something pretty rare, actually. It's called an earnings quality anomaly. See, most companies, right, they really struggle to turn the profits they report on paper into actual cash in the bank. Melstacorp, well, they're doing the complete opposite. For every single rupee of profit they put on their books, they actually generated 1 rupee and 28 cents in cold, hard cash. That is just an elite level of cash conversion. But it begs the question, doesn't it? Is the entire empire built on solid ground, or is this just one flashy trick? Well, let's find out. So let's start where everybody else does, with the profit and loss statement. This is the story the company wants to tell the world. And on the surface, it's a strong story. Top-line revenues up over 9%, hitting a massive 130 billion rupees. But here's what's really impressive. In this crazy inflationary environment, they kept their gross margins steady at 29%. That tells you they've got serious pricing power. They just pass those rising costs right along to the customer. But take a look at this. This chart tells the real story. This isn't some well-balanced empire. No, it's totally lopsided. The beverage sector is the absolute anchor, the cash cow, pulling in a staggering 86% of the group's entire operating profit. And then you have tourism, which is still a significant drag, just bleeding money. And then, bam, you hit this wall, an income tax bill of 9.37 billion rupees. That works out to an effective tax rate of almost 50%. Think about that for a second. For every 2 rupees they earned, 1 went straight to the government. So you gotta ask, right? If half your earnings are getting wiped out by taxes, how on earth did the final profit that goes to shareholders still manage to jump by 24%? The math doesn't seem to add up. Well, here's the answer. It wasn't about selling more stuff. It was about getting their financial house in order. They just stopped bleeding money on interest payments, slashing their finance costs by over 21%. So that profit growth? It wasn't driven by sales. It was driven by some really smart financial management. And that financial discipline leads us one level deeper, away from the P&L and into the balance sheet. This is where we get to see the real bones of the company. The first thing that just jumps right off the page is the sheer scale. We are talking about a massive operation with a total asset base of 392 billion rupees. Now check this out, because you've got 2 different things happening here. On one hand, you have a fantastic sign of discipline. Receivables are down. That means they're collecting cash from their customers faster. Love to see it. But on the other hand, inventory is up by over 14%. Is that a problem, or are they just stocking up for the festive season? Given their cash situation, I'm betting it's strategic, but it's definitely a number you have to watch. All this discipline really pays off, though. The net asset value, basically the company's book value per share, jumped an incredible 14% to almost 130 rupees, and that's in just 6 months, a huge increase. But here's the catch. You always got to read the fine print. A massive chunk of that growth, 11.3 billion rupees, didn't come from selling more things. It came from just revaluing their investments on paper. And we have to be crystal clear about this. That's paper wealth, not hard cash generated by the business. Which brings us perfectly to the final and, frankly, the most important part of this whole thing. We're going to look past the paper profits and accounting adjustments and get to the cash reality. We're looking at the cash flow statement, what I call the true P&L. And we're right back where we started, with that 1.28 anomaly. The cash flow statement is where we find the proof. You see, cash doesn't lie. This is the ultimate health check for any company. So how they actually do it? Well, the formula is simple, but it's really powerful. You start with the reported profit, about 19 billion. Then you add back non-cash expenses like depreciation. But here, this is the masterstroke. You then add the $5.5 billion in actual cash they collected from customers. That is the direct result of that discipline we saw earlier. And just like that, a paper profit transforms into a massive $12.46 billion in operating cash. Now, even after they spent about $4.6 billion on maintaining and growing the business, they were still left with almost 7.9 billion rupees in free cash flow. And that, my friends, is the good stuff. Pure, unrestricted cash they can use for anything. So what did they do with all that cash? They didn't just let it sit there. They used it to aggressively make the company stronger, paying back a staggering 10.9 billion rupees in debt. This right here explains exactly why their finance costs dropped so much. They're systematically cleaning up their balance sheet. Okay, so we've peeled back all the layers. We've looked at the profits, the balance sheet, and the cash. So what's the real story? What's the final verdict on Melstacorp's engine? I think it all boils down to 3 key takeaways. 1, the earnings quality is simply elite. Turning every rupee of profit into 1.28 in cash is exceptional. 2, it's all being powered by the beverage sector. That division is a cash printing machine that's funding the debt cleanup for the entire group. And 3, their asset turnover is low. This means their massive investments, especially in tourism, just aren't working hard enough yet. They're not sweating enough. So what should you take away from all this? At its core, Melstacorp is a business that is fundamentally becoming leaner, stronger, and richer in cash. And it's managing to do all of this while carrying one of the heaviest tax burdens out there. The numbers show a very clear strategy. Use the cash cow to strengthen the core, pay down debt, and get the other sectors ready for future growth.